Great. All right. And we've got our recording on. We've got our audience in the house. We've got our fabulous artist here. And we're live on Facebook. We've got the Facebook gods on our side today. So what else could we say? So first of all, welcome, Jamele. Thanks so much for being here. And anything you'd like to say to be present?
I'm grateful. Thank you, Karina.
Good. Good. Let's see. So I'd like to just introduce myself and then I'll introduce our guest. I'm Karina Sephora, and it's great to be with all of you. And I started this Connect and Create a year ago. In fact, I got a notice that I had episode 1 this week a year ago. And I began Connect and Create because I wanted to have an opportunity to connect with other artists, other creative people. And frankly, I missed running into people at art openings and talks and all that fun stuff, you know? And so that's how Connect and Create was born. I was also a guest speaker on someone else's Zoom radio show, and I enjoyed it. It actually inspired me to do a TED Talk, which I've started, but I've gotten busy and kind of put on the back burner. And so I thought, well, hey, this is a format that I could create and be able to connect with other people. Hence the name, Connect and Create. I also this year recently received a grant from the Fulton County Council for the Arts to fund this programming, which has been wonderful and so grateful. And news to our audiences, we have 4 episodes left. And so the countdown has begun to
dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So that's what I wanted to say about the show. And now I'd like to introduce our wonderful guest, Jamele Wright Sr. And definitely. Anything you'd like to say before I give you your professional introduction?
Oh, no. No.
Okay. Well, Jamele was born and raised in Ohio. And at the age of 22, Jamele Wright moved with his family to Atlanta, Georgia. And while raising his family, Jamele produced art, jazz, and poetry events throughout Atlanta, realizing that there were many young artists not being represented. And he started a gallery called Neo-Renaissance
Art House. Neo-Renaissance Art House.
Neo-Renaissance Art House.
Yeah.
And after curating the gallery for over a year, Jamele was inspired to pursue his own artistic career. And after a number of solo and group exhibitions, Mr. Wright graduated from Georgia State University with a Bachelor of Arts. There we go. In art history. I had my master's degree there. I don't know if you ever shared that with you. Yeah.
You did.
Art and art history. And he concentrated on African and African-American contemporary art. So Jamele graduated with a Master's of Fine Art from the School of Visual Arts, otherwise known as SVA. SVA in Manhattan, New York.
Manhattan.
And he's completed a fellowship at Project for Empty Spaces in Newark, New Jersey.
You should check them out.
Huh?
You should check them out. They're a really great place.
Yeah, I would love to. I've done a couple projects in New York, and I've always meant to. My family's all from New York. I've always meant to get back into my roots. So, and he now maintains his studio practice in Atlanta, Georgia.
ATL, shawty.
Yeah. So without further ado, welcome, Jamele. And something special I'd like to say is I see that we have Madeline with us, who's the curator for the exhibition that's currently up at the Marietta Cobb Museum in Marietta, right on the square. And Jamele and I are both artists that are exhibiting in that show. So you want to check their website for times that you can visit. I need to do that myself. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, welcome, Jamele.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for choosing me. I'm so grateful. And it's so humbled that someone would, want to have this kind of conversation with me. It's really, really great. Thank you. But I'm also really encouraged because you yourself are a really great artist, and for you to pick someone out that you would want to talk to is a great honor as well. So you're very respected, and I respect you a lot as a artisan and a fellow workman out here trying to make the world a better place.
Thank you.
Prettier place.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today? What are we going to talk about, Karita? You want to talk about some art? You want to talk about some, some pictures? You want to talk about process?
Yeah, I think any of those would be fine. Did you prepare some images that you want to
I
show?
did. I did.
I thought so.
Yep.
So this would be a great time to share.
Yep. So I'm in this phase where I'm dealing with this idea about the new magic, like needing this new phase to happen in us. Um, COVID was really great opportunity for those that really tuned in to really dig deeper, remind ourselves who we are, who we were, and come back to life. And I was doing some of that same thing, but we will go back. This is so what a lot of people don't know is that I used to rap back when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. And I believe that this machine right here is probably one of um, the greatest machines that has ever been created. And this is the SP 1200. And this SP 1200 allowed people to take a song or a small bit of a song for like a couple of seconds and then put it into this machine, record in this machine, and then loop it, have it play over and over again, right? And that's what we now call sampling. This is one of the first sampling equipments, right? And the reason why I choose this is because I said I used to rap, but I'm a huge hip hop head, right? And I really what I love about hip hop is I love the connections that you get from many different people and many different places. I like the fact that a lot of hip hop is inspired by the Caribbean. Some of it's inspired by uh, uh, when I say Caribbean, I'm also talking about Latin Caribbean. I'm talking about Jamaica Caribbean, Trinidad. You have all these different cultures that came together in New York at Bronx River Projects and created hip hop, right? And it takes all these different people from all these different places. And then it took all these different styles of music to create this. And then it took a DJ to put it all together. And then it took a rapper to rap on top of it, given his life experiences. And so you had this gather of all these people together um, that makes this one thing, right? So I began thinking about that when I was in grad school, this idea of making and this idea of making a really great painting. And then after the idea of making a really great painting, how did I want it to hang? And then how did I want it to, and then I wanted to include something that was definitely American, but then I also wanted to create something that was African because myself as an African American, I'm not just one thing. I'm kind of both things, but that I'm neither one of those things, right? So to me, it's this kind of funny relationship, Karina, with this fabric because this fabric, although we consider it to be an African fabric, it's not really an African fabric at all. The fabric I'm talking about is this right here.
Mm.
It's known as a Dutch wax cloth. So I started sewing that together, and that's where I learned how to sew. And then I was making these paintings, and I would cut out the bottom of the painting and then sew this to that. And that's how it began. Taking a painting that was like a 9 by 6 foot painting, and then folding it, being inspired by people like Sam Gilliam and Al Loving, but wanting to kind of add something different. And then I began putting in the shapes. And then I thought adding this fabric here to it um, would then bring in that African aspect. I don't really know about this whole funky thing about being African and African American. It's kind of this weird uh, dichotomy because, as we're seeing in the news, African Americans are still being seen as second class citizens. So does that really? So does that really make us American? And because we have been here for as long as we have, um, are we still African? So it's kind of like this conversation kind of question that I'm playing with the viewer and using these two things. And this title of Going Home was me kind of considering um, during 2016, um, because that was when Michael Brown happened. I was wondering if there was a place where African Americans could be safe, where would it be? And I wanted these to be like portals. I want them to be like places that if I um, if I was to be transported into a space, where could I be transported to? And then these would be those portals. Like, you remember that movie Stargate?
Yeah.
I think about Stargate, right? And I think about how there's this portal, and then they go inside of it, and then there's this whole other world. And it doesn't have to be like theirs, with it was kind of like quasi Egyptian. I just wanted to be someplace where I could be safe. I wasn't a target. I wasn't, my face wasn't always the point of reference, that I could just be a person, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so I began, that's how I started. And then I did this one, and this was in a show in Jersey City on their artist walk, and is actually featured in a number of their flyers. And then the Dutch wax cloth. So as we look here, what I began doing is this idea of sampling. I was using scraps that I would find here in Atlanta, and I would ship them back to New York with me. And because what I liked about the scraps is I like the scraps as a found material, right? And the South, what I love about living here in the South is the South is a place of the found material, right? Like, there's things everywhere. There's always something to pick up. There's always something to bring together, and then you can sew it together. And then with the fabric, I was beginning to sew these scraps together. And I like the odd shapes that they would create because they're not perfect squares, right? Some scraps I would get and they would be triangles. And one friend of mine is a dressmaker. So you would get like all these, like, the bottom of the dress is completely torn off, or the in order to make it curve, you have some curved parts. Every now and again, I even find dresses that she had thrown away in there. Um, so, but yeah, I was using that. And then going back here to where I'm using this red clay, I started using this red clay as a paint. And I had taken a bucket of red clay with me up to Georgia, up to New York. And they were like, "What is that bucket for?" And I'm like, "It's Georgia clay, because the medicinal purposes of the red clay here, and the color of it is like no other place in the world." And I also believe it's, when you think about the great Pangea of all the world coming back together, the red clay from Georgia goes directly into Africa, right? It goes into Uganda and into yeah, parts of Ghana, parts of West Africa. So I find it kind of interesting that these two land pieces are kind of connected and not connected, and continuing on with that narrative. And I kind of consider that like a land bridge, like a magical land bridge that takes us into another land. So this is kind of different because this is where in New York I kind of discovered something. And that was being on the trains in New York, you're always like really super close together, right? There's sometimes you're so close together that um, it would feel inappropriate. Early mornings, 8 a.m. on the train, and everyone is just packed tight, and they're jumping on the train knowing that it's packed tight, so they can be packed tight too. But what I would find in being packed so tight is these types of patterns that were being created, right? The fact that you have this blue here, and then you have these stripes here, and then you have straight black and straight purple, but then you have this orange with this black zipper, and then you have the bottom of this dress here, creating all these different types of shapes and these kind of patterns. And then I started thinking about this, right? And how these go together. Um, and then I stopped, and then like it really started with this woman here, with this blouse that she has and these pink flowers and the earrings that perfectly match, and then the nail polish that perfectly matches, and then the guy right behind her, and then this guy right here. And I started, all of a sudden I got like this weird vision where I stopped seeing people in these things. I just start seeing line, color, shape, and form, the formal elements. And I don't know where it happened, but maybe it's because of seeing people so much that everything kind of got blurred. And then I just began to see color, line, shape, and form. Um, so as this looks like people to other people, all I'm seeing is how this neckline forms against this color here, how his color is against her, this reflection here, this curved line around this window, this hook right here on the back of this person's backpack. Um, and that's all I begin to see after a while. And I started getting kind of in love with this busyness, and and trying to figure out new ways of seeing, that I was taught before, of abstraction, giving someone like a space to rest their eye. I want to kind of eliminate that and kind of throw you into a situation where the busyness in itself is where you had to find your peace, and that's the way New York was, in the midst of this busyness, in the midst of standing so close to somebody, you had to forget that that was happening, and you had to like just be in your own skin, right, and listen to your music. And you had to learn how to do this stare, like the New York stare, where you can look at someone because you're face to face with them, but you're not looking at them at all. And that was kind of weird because I'm from Atlanta, or I've lived here for so long, that everyone's touchy and lovey and and friendly and speaks to you, and I had to learn how to kind of not be that anymore. Um, and so it was a very wonderful experience to kind of think of myself in a different way. I also listened to a lot more Spotify back then too, um, because you always had that music to travel with. So I was listening to lots of Spotify, creating lots of playlists to go with my work. Um, and I don't do that as much anymore, which is kind of funny because I miss it. Um, and also a lot more fresh air, because here, because of the heat, we're in the house with the air conditioning. And there I was outside a lot because of all the walking. And yeah. So that's when I separated the fabric from the African fabric, or the Dutch wax cloth, away from the painting, and just painted it on its own. And this is actually the second one. Um, and it took a while to get this shape. And then I started adding these pouches because of the gris bags. Um, the Africans used to carry these things around their neck with with Quran passages on them. And then you remember this, Karina. During the '80s, Black people used to have, or like people in hip hop used to have the medallions, the African medallions, and they would have like mirrors in them, or they would be like the African, X Clan and Tribe Called Quest, and they would be like African medallions, no gold, right? There was this whole thing. Um, and then it evolved to that. But before that, and that's where the title comes from, In Transit, during the Great Migration of African Americans moving from the South to the North in hopes of change, um, new opportunities, they used to carry these little bags around with them that had um, like their rabbit's foot or a good luck charm or amulet, and they would put it in their pocket and they would carry it with them. So I wanted to have this have lots of them. I want them to have lots of charms and lots of magical things on these pieces, so that these pieces themselves would almost be like an amulet. These pieces would be these magical spaces, these magical territories that you could just um, jump into, right? I was very proud of this one too, because I really felt like for the second one to have nailed it as well as I did, because you know how it is when you first start something new, right? It takes a while for you to really get it, kind of be happy with something. And I was pretty happy with this one.
Kind of looks almost like the state of Georgia, like the shape of Georgia.
Yeah, yeah, it could be.
Just a
Could
little.
be.
All
Uh,
right.
and then this is when I didn't really know how to hang my work. I was really trying to figure out like how to do that. And this was number 8. Yeah, and this one was 96 by 84. They got kind of large. And then there's the Gregory bags. And this is what evolved to be number 20. Um, and this is now I've matured to some degree. I now know how to hang them. I now am putting grommets in them. I'm now um, sewing them tighter. The Grigri bags are here. I'm adding the strings to those pouches that are much longer, and I am a lot more confident in making them now. The color I think is much better on them, and the fabric stands out just enough. So um, yeah, I think they've evolved quite a bit from 2 to 20. And then I got kind of bored with the idea of In Transit. In Transit was kind of based off of this idea that like when I was growing up, my my parents used to like to travel. Well, we traveled every summer, every spring. Anytime we was out of school, we was gone somewhere. We drove from Ohio, from Dayton is actually where I'm from. I claim Dayton. I was born in Columbus, raised in Dayton, and moved here from Cincinnati. But um, we drove from Dayton, Ohio to California and then back. We took the train to California and then back. We took a plane from Dayton to California and then back. So it was really wonderful to have those kind of adventures, where we went to DC, we drove to DC, we drove to Alabama, we drove to, you know, we would just drive to all these different places, and I would just, you would just see these other, you would see America, and I really think that as a break point, and for someone like yourself who does a lot of traveling, a lot of hiking, I really find it amazing how we fight so much over this land, and it's just so beautiful. and there's so much land. There's so much land that like nobody's on. And I think there's a way that we could share that and not give it up at the same time, right? I think that there's plenty of land, just like there's plenty of money, just like there's plenty of things for everybody. Um, and it's a really America's a really beautiful place. When I was in New York, I got to drive up to Massachusetts, go to Boston, and oh my God, it was just I went there in November around my birthday, and um, and the leaves are falling, and everything's like gold and yellow, and you know, and reds, and it was just so beautiful, and um, and I just think that this land is really a beautiful place. So, in creating these kind of magical territories, I wanted to transition in transition. I wanted to I wanted to talk about that transition, but also talk about how people have moved, have migrated from one place to the other. Um, it with the hope that something will be different somewhere else, right? That maybe if they move from the Jim Crow South and they move to the North, that maybe they can have a man's wage. They can actually make the salary they need to make to take care of their family. They can have an education. They can sit at a counter. They could like for instance, I'm from Ohio, and Ohio is known as the state of the funk, where all funk music really comes from. Because in Detroit and in Cleveland and Ohio, Toledo was manufacturing, car manufacturing places, and they were able to afford music lessons. So people like Bootsy Collins is from Dayton, is from Cincinnati, and then you have Ohio players. Some of them are from Dayton, and you have Zapp and Roger that's from Dayton, and so you have all of these. Parliament Funkadelic is from Sheila. Are they from Detroit? I think they're from Detroit because they were first called Parliament,
Right.
right? And they were a doo-wop group. They were like a group that was similar to the Temptations when they first started, and then they transitioned into the funk, and so you have all of this happening in Ohio. Um, so you have this kind of feeling in the North that you can be something different. Um, and I'm grateful for that because my parents moved from Birmingham, Alabama, to Ohio. Um, my father went to Central State, and my mom moved to Columbus to be with um, my my aunt, and to go. And she eventually went to Ohio State. She went to East High in Columbus, Ohio. But it's that whole idea of moving from one place to another, and just like that, I want to play with those gree bags. I want to play with that magic a little bit, right? And I had done pouches in one way for a long time, and here in Reborn, I kind of want to like punch it up a little bit, and I want to do something different with them, rather than them just hanging the same way all the time. So I created these much smaller pouches, much smaller, um, probably no bigger than your fist, as opposed to being really long. And I did that on these, on this one, and then this is how they look close up. And the left one is the in transit pouches, how they're just you know goes together. But here I want to do something different. This is the reborn pouches, where I really want to play with their shape. I want to not just let them hang off of the piece, but kind of shape them around the piece. I'm also adding knots. I add these knots onto the pieces, and those knots are just additional. I don't throw anything away. They're just these scraps of fabric, and I just tie them up and then sew them on there to add an additional texture. And that is Reborn number 2. Yeah, and that's is full. So all of this is, of course, hand sewn. The only thing, all this is machine sewn for the most part, and then I hand sew the pouches on and hand sew the knots. And this is reborn number. It's really supposed to be 3. I don't know why it says 23. I haven't done that many. Number 3. I'm only on number 4 with the reborn. Um, and then here you see where I'm beginning to loop these pouches. Um, and this was really long. This one actually drags the floor because I wanted to kind of invade the viewer's space, um, kind of force them to have to navigate around it to some degree. And I really like bold colors. I've been working on this idea for more muted colors, but that's another day. And then we get to us. This is the work that's in the exhibit at the Marietta Cobb Museum. And this is called Cosmotastic Black Man Oral. Can you say that 3 times fast, Karina?
I don't know if I can say it one time fast. I don't mean.
It goes right. I wanted, like I mentioned, Parliament Funkadelic. I like the idea of this name, this Funkadelic, right? This supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, really fun stuff. We're so heavy nowadays, and we're so into, we were in the election. We had the election, and then we have what's happening in Georgia now, and we have um, just a lot of things to always be concerned and worried about. And I don't want to deal with that kind of stuff in my work. I want my work to be a place of rest for people. I want it to be a place where they can escape. I want it to be a place where they are conscious of what's happening in the world, but they're taking this time for peace, right? And again, almost like those gree bads, they're now exploded and they're now bigger, and they've become the amulet, and they've become the goodwill piece, and you can jump inside of those, or they're really kind of intricate, where I've taken the pouches and just made the pouches a piece in themselves. So we can break down this word, cosmotastic elements of order. All right. Cosmo, of course, being space, right? This idea of transitioning of this portal, right? And then that's where order comes from. And then tastic is fantastic. And black, there's this concept called the black fantastic, but I wanted to kind of throw that around. And illmance, um, illmatic is a term for like dope. That was Nas's the title of Nas's first album, Nasir Jones, the rapper. And Mance is kind of like a derivative of dance. I love dancing. Dancing is a space of my inner peace when everything around me is chaotic and I need to kind of get back to center. Um, put on Prince Uptown, and I am in the zone. Just as much as I love hip hop, Prince is my favorite musician. Um, and this was number 2. And it has these. I put the knots actually the um, on the pouches, and then I used the red clay again as a paint. I used the red clay here, um, and then I just kind of shape it. And here's another one. And these were kind of interesting to hang and very interesting to create and making something new. So that's it. That's me.
Great.
So this work is presently at the Cobb Marion Museum. There's actually, I think, Madeline, you have 5 pieces out. So it's a pretty good exhibition, and Karina's in it. So I'm excited to talk about your work for the show.
Well, we've got just a couple minutes left.
Okay.
So let's see if there's any questions at all from anyone that's here in our Zoom space. And I don't think we have a couple people that have liked it on Facebook. We don't have any comments on Facebook. So anyone here in this Zoom space have any questions I'd like to ask for Jamele? It's great to have a sneak peek of some of your work at the show. I need to get out there myself, hoping to do this coming, not this weekend, but next week. So. Great. You want to stop sharing?
Sure.
I really like your work.
Thank you so much.
It's so colorful. It's just it's wow. It's just got so much to it. I want to touch it.
Yes. And you're welcome to touch it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, you're welcome to touch it.
I like all the embellishments and the texture. Yeah.
That's the secret about my work. I don't advertise it, but if I'm around it, people touch it because I'm a tactile person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when something's really beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
I find a way to touch it. I get in trouble all the time. I just go past a piece and just go, whoop, okay. I just need to touch it.
Got it.
But yeah.
Yeah, neat.
Betsy, do you know where the Marietta Cobb Museum is?
I'm looking at it because we're going up to Emerson, Georgia to get our second COVID shot. So maybe we could stop by on the way back on Friday.
Perfect. I believe,
Celebrate. No, it sounds great.
I believe the hours are 11 to 4. I should know this.
Yeah, so our thing is like we drive right through Cobb on the way back and it's like noon.
Okay.
Good.
It sounds like what a treat that would be.
Yeah, it's right on the square in Marietta.
Okay, yeah, we're very familiar with the square.
Yeah. So if you're like on the square, it's like a little side street right off of it.
Okay, awesome. I've got it in my phone. Thank God for Google.
I usually eat at Tsunami when I'm up there. It's like Asian tacos.
Sounds great.
So great. Well, anything else you want to share or ask about, Betsy?
I love your brilliant ideas. I've been looking at like landscape and try to see the different shades and stuff, but I love like looking at people, even though I grew up in Boston. So yeah, I used to take the trolley and the streetcar. So seeing people mashed together, I love that idea. I'll have to look at magazines or something. We're not mashed together. You know, it'll be a while before we're mashed together.
Right. And I mean, I found it really interesting because being in Georgia is like when people like my friends from New York say like, you guys are just out in the open, like in Georgia, like y'all act like y'all don't care, like there's no COVID. And I'm like, you have to understand that like we're always 6 feet away from each other. I mean, we don't have a space issue here. So we are, it may seem like everybody's out and about doing everything, but it's generally because there's so much space here that you don't have to be right on top of each other. So
I know, and we get to be out all the time because we have so much good weather. It's not like where you're snowed in and then you escape as soon as the weather's nice.
No, I mean, my favorite thing about Atlanta is I call them the Georgia winters. It ends in February. It's my favorite.
I know.
When I was in New York, my first winter in New York, it got August and it was cold. And I was like, it's cold in August? What is happening here? Like, they were like, yeah, it's cold in August. I'm like, oh my God, it doesn't get cold till November in Georgia. Like, I was spoiled.
Yes, you lost your Ohio genes.
No, I know.
I'm loving the new work.
Thank you so much. So Sheila has been around since, oh my God, Sheila has seen my work evolve from me doing soft pastels all the way to now. So she's a vet.
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
I feel like last year was 10 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
you're
Right.
So you're talking about 10 years beyond that.
Right. 10 years beyond that. Yeah.
Oh, neat.
But even going back to the idea about like us being here in Georgia, like we kind of take it for granted. But I mean, it's just like what even with climate change right now, I mean, it was February and we were experiencing like 70-degree, almost 80-degree weather.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it went from 30 degrees to 80 degrees, just sort of like that.
Yeah, you can have all seasons in one day.
I love it. I love it. It's my favorite.
It's a lot better than being snowed and iced
Oh
in.
my God.
Oh,
Tell
yeah.
him, Sheila.
I
Sheila
love Ohio.
she lives in Cleveland. Oh, she'll call me and tell me about the snow, and I'm just like, you can have it.
Oh yeah, I went to school near Dayton, Ohio, and in 1978, it snowed
Yes, I
all of
remember that. I remember that. The
all
snowstorm.
of January. It
The
snowed.
blizzard of 77.
Yeah, the 78
Yeah.
blizzard.
No, it was the
78.
3 blizzards of. I mean, it just didn't stop. Went from
Right.
yeah, that was
That
crazy.
was epic.
That was epic.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
true.
because I was in the snow belt at that time. I was at school and we were in the snow belt in the valley. So
Wow.
Well, we've got just a couple more minutes left for today's conversation. Grace or Madeline, anything that you'd like to add or ask? Madeline, anything you'd like to say about the show that's up? Or Grace, anything that you'd like to say?
Jamel's, the thing that drew me to Jamel's work first was textile. I love African fabrics, and I love the story of the remix using the Dutch wax. Dutch wax was originally,
Thank you, Grace, for telling
you
us
know,
the story.
the Dutch were making fabric for their colonies in Indonesia. And so they wanted to make a duplicate of that fabric so that they could sell it to the Indonesians, who did not like it because it wasn't well done and it wasn't as immaculate as their batik. So they used to travel down the south through the currents to Southern Africa, where they stop there to fuel up, exchange goods for services, and then continue on to the east. So they used them in Africa to trade, and the Africans didn't mind it. They used it. They actually liked that it wasn't looked like it was machine made. They appreciated the flaws in the batik work. So it ended up, they've been doing it now for a couple of centuries, really.
And thank you, Grace, for saying that. I didn't mention the story about the Dutch wax fabric. But that's kind of the story I liked about it too. The fact that it was that it's from Holland, but the Africans made it their own, right?
They did, yes.
And the same way that here in America does not necessarily claim Africans all the time, but
yes,
African Americans have made it their own, right?
They've made the United States their own. Right. So initially you had said something about wondering if you were American as an African American, right? So I consider African Americans foundational Americans because they were intrinsic in the building of the country. So to me, if that's not American, then I don't know what is.
Yeah. And I now use the term kind of indigenous.
Yes. Yeah. Because they were even here. We've been coming back and forth from before the slave trade.
Right. So, and that's where like this idea of this in transit is kind of like, it has like this double, triple
very
meaning,
much.
right?
Very much.
Where, African Americans was the Great Migration,
Yes.
Africans in transit to America,
Yes.
this fabric in transit from Holland to Africa.
Yes.
So there's all these kind of entryways for this
Yes.
in transit, but then also this idea of being reborn.
Yes, always. Yes. And
Right.
remade. So the remix, I mean, that really spoke to me. And to me as an continental African living in, growing up in the US and on really both sides of the continent of the Atlantic, it's definite. The remix speaks to me. The taking something that is supposed to be from one region and remixing it in and redefining it in a different way. So even the way African Americans use language.
Right.
So these days I watch YouTubers on the continent and they're speaking African American vernacular. And I'm
Right.
like, why, what, well, like how wonderful the remix of language. And then it goes back to the indigenous continent and they're using it.
It's fascinating. It's
Yes, it
fascinating.
is.
And then also fascinating the way that like Fela Kuti took like some of the music of James Brown
Yes.
and kind of
Yes.
incorporated into Afropop. But then also the
Absolutely.
way that they're now that we've sampled Fela Kuti
Yes.
for hip hop.
Yes.
So it's like this very secular thing that's happened that's really beautiful in the way that the diaspora is now causing. It's not just African Americans that are causing this influence. It's now becoming this whole diasporic
Yes.
movement.
But it always has. It's
Yeah.
always been going on. Just that now we can see it in real time because we have technology, the internet. But it's been going on all along from the 1500s, even the 1400s until
Right.
today.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
So the work speaks to exactly that. And that's why it resonates with me.
Thank you, Grace.
And that's why I tuned in.
And Grace's work is beautiful too. So for
Yeah.
anyone that is on here, look at Grace Kisa. Her work is fantastic as well.
Yeah, Grace was a guest. I don't know, like episode
Like early, like one of the early ones. Yes.
maybe at 20 or 30. It's right in there. 20, probably in
Yeah.
the 20 something. We'll have to look
Okay.
at the invitation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
great to hear your voice, Grace, and welcome back. I know you've been traveling.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be back.
We need to catch up again and take another walk or something.
Definitely.
Oh,
Definitely.
wow, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I love walks.
Yes.
Well, we have a little message from Madeline. She thanked us for the shout out for the show, definitely for the Elements show. I know it's something that's been percolating for a long time, and wishes Betsy a great visit. And there will be some artist talks, so keep your ears peeled if you want to hear a little more from folks like Jamele and myself and many of the other artists. How many artists are in that show? There's quite a number.
Oh man, I think there's like
8 or 10 or something like that. A number of them.
a number.
But,
Yeah, maybe around 10. It was
yeah.
quite a bit.
Yeah.
But
quite-
you know what's really great about the exhibition is that even though there's a lot of people, it doesn't feel like it's crowded. It feels very well thought out and Madeline did a great job curating the show. I mean, it's
yeah, I can't wait to come see it. And I can't wait to see what we do in terms of artist talks and interaction with the work. Well, our time has come to an end, and it's really been wonderful to see your work. And I have one question.
Sure.
Where did Dutch wax cloths ever evolve into that name dashiki? Or is that just like what's called?
Daishiki is actually an African name that means, which I really find it very interesting. Daishiki is actually the garment itself, but the pattern is actually Angeline. But the Daishiki name means a nephew that is like my own son. Is that right, Grace? Do you know?
Yes, you are right.
Yeah.
That's Swahili.
Yeah. So I think it's fantastic that this garment that African Americans wear called a daishiki relates right back to Africa, meaning the nephew that is like my own son.
Cool.
It's really kind of beautiful.
I had a set of dashikis that my parents dressed me in when I was a little tiny kid.
It's
Great
wonderful,
photographs, very goofy.
but wonderful, really.
Yeah. And I was
And
thinking,
it's come back around again now that
Yeah.
people are wearing them.
yeah, all kinds of fashions and fabrics. I always think of Jesse Jackson as wearing them too.
Ah, right.
The last things Martin Luther King said to him was, go put on a, you can't wear that, go put on a suit jacket, or, you gotta look sharp,
Yeah.
Mhm.
The daishiki are a lot of people think of it as a kente cloth, but the kente cloth was actually created by the Ghanaians,
Yes,
and it's very a very intricate
it's hand
trade.
woven.
All I'm like hand woven,
Mhm.
Yeah, very
but that came to America by way of Robert Karanja, who was the president of Ghana at one time, who got in a lot of trouble for wearing um, the kente, because the kente cloth is only made for kings,
Mhm.
for royalty, and then the president of the country wore it, and then America started saying, well, we want this kente cloth too. So it's very
Mhm.
interesting the way this idea of fashion, this idea of
Mhm.
clothing has always
Mhm.
been a very intricate part of the diaspora. Um, yeah,
great.
yeah.
What a great conversation to complete today's conversation with.
Hi,
And
Sabrina.
thanks again for being here, and come back next week.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
All right.
Great dialogue, wonderful work. And thank you, all of you that showed up. And have a wonderful week.
All right.
And go check out the show at the Marietta Cobb Museum, The Elements.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.